Okay, so first things first, here's a color palette that I use to do this eye. Burnt umber, a soft white, a titanium white, turquoise, viridian, cadmium yellow, Prussian blue, ultramarine blue, and then later on I had either yellow ochre or raw sienna. I can't remember. Either or works for this purpose. But anyways, if you're doing a blue eye similar to the one that I'm doing, that is all you're gonna need. So first things first, it looks like I'm painting black, right? Wrong. Wrong. It's not black. It's the appearance of black, but it's not black. So as you can see, if you refer back to the palette we went over, I mixed burnt umber with ultramarine blue to get the appearance of black. And I never use black in my paintings, like very rarely. Not let me not lie on here. Like very, very rarely do I use black. So if I need something to be extremely dark, I just mix blue with brown. And I'm starting by filling in the pupil and then some like outlines of her eyelashes. I'm not really getting too crazy with the eyelashes. And to be honest, in this tutorial, I don't go over eyelashes because I never really finished them. This is just strictly like the eyeball. But first things first, I fill in the pupil and then I do like a thin black outline of the outer part of her. Is it iris? I don't know the parts of the eye. The outside part of her eye. I'm just kind of mapping in the dark areas. That's how I'm starting out. Now, I use a reference photo because I can't think of these things in my head. So I'm looking back at my reference photo and I'm matching the darkest blue I see in that reference photo. I'm using the palette that I showed earlier, mixing a dark blue. I probably mixed some Prussian blue with some ultramarine blue and maybe a little bit of brown. I'm assuming that's what I did to mix that. Ooh, who knows? Anyways, and I'm filling in the darkest areas, the darkest blue areas of her eyeball that I see in the reference photo. And I like reference photos for me, like I'm not gonna say they're loosely based, but they're kind of loosely based. Like, I don't try to go a one for one, just a quick overview. What do I see? Where are the darkest parts of the blue in her eye? And then I try to mimic that as best as possible on the canvas. Okay, so now is where I add a little bit of, I think, yellow ochre or maybe raw sienna. I'm adding it underneath her eye because, once again, I'm referring back to my reference photo. And in the reference photo, underneath her pupil, and kind of sort of the whole perimeter of her pupil has this like yellow ochre, almost like a tad bit reddish color. So I'm just trying to mimic that. And I'm keeping everything soft and I'm not too worried about if colors are blending with each other or not. I'm just kind of mapping out what goes where. Color blocking, if you will. And I'm gonna speed through some of this because I really don't know what to say. What am I doing here? But okay, so now I'm picking up like a mid-tone blue, and I'm filling in those kind of open areas. Still looking at my reference photo to kind of, keep it accurate, but wherever there's open spaces, I'm now putting in my mid-tone, which is a blue, a lighter blue. I think I mixed a little bit of burnt umber in it to get it like a grayish tone, probably some titanium white in there too. Um, yeah, and just blocking in the open areas that have not been covered in paint yet. And I'm leaving some open areas because you'll see here shortly what I'm about to do is take an even lighter blue once I get there. There we go. And filling in those open spaces. And that's what's really bringing in that like dimension. Having different shades helps bring the dimension to the eyeball. It's probably the hardest part is identifying the shades you need to use. But I think to keep it simple, if you just stick with a dark, a mid, and then like a highlight, you can't go wrong. So now I'm filling in some spaces with the brightest of blues that I'll use to really add that depth and dimension to the eyeball. Because when light is catching your eye, you get those nice different colors, and that's what I'm trying to mimic here as best as possible. Also, just be careful when you're working with lighter colors. I did leave some open spaces, so I didn't have to worry about painting on top of darker paint, but do be careful, especially with oil paint, if you're painting on top of darker colors. Just worry about the pressure of your brush. You don't want to apply too much pressure because then you start mixing paints together versus laying paints on top of each other, which is what you want to do in this instance because I don't want the paints to mix together. So like a light pressure if you're applying a lighter color on top. And so now I'm just kind of continuing to go through the eye, like refining the lines and the colors to make it look a little bit softer. And then I went back over the pupil again because it wasn't dark enough to me. So I did it again. Now I'm taking like my highlights. So really that like really bright blue I just used, I probably added a little bit more titanium white to it to make it more vibrant. I'm going back through again and kind of picking out certain areas that I really want to highlight with, the brightest color I plan on using on the eyeball. And once again, like I'm applying a light pressure because if you put too much pressure on it, you're going to end up mixing colors and then you're doing all this work for nothing. But yeah, light pressure, adding some more highlights. Okay, so then I get out my little tiny mop brush and I'm going to do a little blending, like very light blending. You shouldn't like lose the shape of the eye or like the shape that the different streaks of colors are making. You're just lightly blending, like rendering it out so it kind of looks a little more harmonious and less streaky. Like I'm blending some of those edges, slightly blending some colors into others. And you'll notice you kind of lose some of the highlight, but like that's okay. Not a big deal. You can go back over and keep refining, which is what you'll see me do later. But yeah, just a very light blending to bring everything together, like barely tapping, very, very light pressure. And then I'm going to go back through with those nice highlight colors I was using and just refine the eye. The places where I think I lost some of the highlights, I'm applying them back. And once again, light pressure because you want that light colored paint to show up. You don't want it to mix with the layers underneath. So here I'm just adding those little highlight details that I think make a huge difference. And when it comes to the whites of the eyes, like they are not white. Don't do that. Don't do that. They're not white. Um, for this, I mix a little bit of soft mixing white, some titanium white, and I thin it out. I thin out the paint and do like the lightest layer on the eyes, like just for my little base layer. And really, you don't even need to do this step. I just like felt like doing it, but I'm just kind of blocking in where the whites of the eyes will be. And then I'll usually mix a tad bit of like burnt umber, a little bit of blue to get almost like a grayish blue color. And that's what I'll use to add those like shadows within the eyeball. Because, like I said, an eyeball is not just white. It's generally like more of like a grayish tone. If you look at pictures or even sometimes like a little yellowish, it can be many different colors, but one color it is not. It's just pure white. So you want to add some depth and dimension in there. I like to do that by adding some like blue grays into parts of the eye, adding different shadows. Once again, I'm referring back to my reference photo. Like it'll be different for you if you're using a reference. So do your best to analyze the reference, see what colors make up the whites of the eyes that you're working on and try to mimic that as best as possible. And for me, I just happen to do like a bluish gray. And then in the front, I think I probably added a little bit more brown to the mix. Just once again, referring back to my reference photo and trying to mimic what I see. And in areas where I feel like I maybe went a little too dark, I went a little too crazy, I'll add just like a tiny bit of titanium white or soft white to my brush and like slowly work it in there, not to overpower the shadow, but to lighten it just a tad. And then I'm taking my little moppy brush once again, and I'm softening the edges between like the end of the colored part of the eye where that meets the whites of the eyes. I'm just slowly, like gently blending that out. Not too much, but just like a slight little blend. Also blending parts of the whites of the eyes that just need a little bit of softness. And then here I'm just continuing with the blending, adding tad bits of white if I need it, and then blending again. And now I'm working kind of like on the waterline area because it is darker. So I'm doing like a darker grayish brown in the waterline in the corners of her eyes to get prepared for this part right here on that little tear duct area. Mixing, I want to say, ooh, let me think of what color. I think I did some Alizarin Crimson, which, sorry, that wasn't a part of the original palette, but like I wasn't, I guess, planning on getting this far in the tutorial, but my bad. We'll keep going with it. Alizarin Crimson, maybe a little bit of blush. It's a shade from Gamblin and probably some titanium white to lighten up some parts, some burnt umber in there. But same concept applies. You're picking like a dark, a mid-tone, and then a highlight color, playing around with those to create texture and depth. And that's how I completed the what do you call it? The tear duct? You know what I'm talking about. Anyways, now I'm kind of just mapping out more colors, like, the eye still needs a lot of refining in terms of, like, outside of the eyeball, but sometimes I get a little bored and I just start color blocking things in just to make myself feel better, so that's probably what I did right there, and I'm doing it again right here. But anyways, the whole point of this little mini tutorial, if you'll call it that, was just to show you how to do, like, the actual eyeball part, and you can take it further, like, if you wanna keep doing layers, you can do that to kind of make it even richer in color and deeper. I'm lazy. If I can do oil paint in one layer, Imma do that, and that's how I operate. So, yeah, hopefully that was a decent explanation. Um, but yeah, just picking a dark, a mid, and a highlight, and that's how you get you an eyeball. Like, don't overcomplicate it. Dumb it down. Don't use pure white for the whites of the eyes. Mix in some grays or some browns or whatever you see in your reference photo to add a little bit more like realism, if you will, to it. But yeah, that's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Please leave a comment if I wasn't clear about something because I am fully aware that I am not a teacher. I'm trying to get better, but if you have any questions, let me know and things you would like to see next. I'm trying to get better about doing little tutorials with oil paint, but one thing about me, some things are just intuitive and I just like know to do them, and I'm trying to learn how to explain them to other people. So this is me trying to get better at that. So yeah, drop a comment, a like, a subscribe. Anyways, bye.